Without the ocean, there is no life.
While Bill was developing business cases for Vancouver Island, he learned that seaweed was going to change the world. After an hour on the phone with one of Canada's most knowledgeable seaweed experts, Bill's entrepreneurial spirit was sparked, not because he needed a new project, but because of the positive social, environmental, and economic benefits this budding sector offered. Seaweed farming helps feed our growing populations, helps revitalize coastal communities, and reverses human impact on the oceans. Only 2% of our global food production comes from the ocean, but oceans cover 70% of our planet.
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
Welcome. I'm Christine Cuvelier of Culinary Concierge. As an executive chef and Canada's leading global culinary trendologist, I think about and taste the future of food. I help my clients launch on trend, on time, great tasting food and menu items. The definition of innovation is the introduction of something that tastes great, is good for you and good for the planet. And you know that could be the definition of seaweed. Cascadia Seaweed are leaders in the rising tide of seaweed innovation. For the past few months, I've been experimenting in my test kitchen, making products with seaweed in them that taste great, that are good for you and good for the planet. For the Seaweed Festival, I reached across Canada, coast to coast, and talked to all my chef friends. They've been experimenting in their kitchens with Alaria and sugar kelp. Every day for the next 7 days of seaweed, log on, watch a chef video, be inspired by their recipes. Let's make this the year kelp is cool. And don't forget, it's all about taste, taste, taste.
My name is Ian Robinson, and I'm the chef and owner of Skippa Restaurant, Toronto, Ontario. We are a seasonal Japanese restaurant focusing on seafood. Mostly comes from the Kyushu Island of Japan. We also use seafood from all over Japan, just depending on the season. I also like to focus on Canadian produce. Whatever we can get that's incredibly fresh, that is what we're into, and that's what we put on the plate. I usually buy salted, fresh, cured, dried, different types of seaweed from Japan. So I'm really excited to be working with Canadian fresh seaweed today. The seaweed we're going to be working with today is a dried seaweed from Japan used to make stock, Canadian Alaria, and sugar kelp. I'm going to be using all these different types of seaweed, 3 different types, to make a spring soup. Alright, welcome to the kitchen. We're going to start working with the seaweed. And something very important to note is that, the Japanese cuisine, they've been using seaweed with deep rooted into how they prepare dishes for at least 1,200 years. So there's a lot of history for how best to use it, how the flavor is extracted in the best way. And as a Japanese trained chef, for the most part, my goal is always to draw out as much umami as possible. I'll include some links and some information with my video, so you'll be able to look at what umami means and really get into that, because that's very fascinating. And fortunately for us, is that different types of seaweed are packed with umami, so the way we use it will really make things taste amazing. You might not be able to taste, oh, this is seaweed, or as we use this, it's definitely going to taste like seaweed because it's a big focus on the dish that I've created today. But just something for you to know at home is that how you're using it, how you decide to use it. If you don't taste it, that's okay. It brings a very round deliciousness to what you make, and more importantly, it's extremely beneficial with the nutrients that it's packed with. Okay, so here we have the 2 fresh seaweeds. The Alaria right here, and then you got the sugar kelp here. Let's start with the Alaria. What I've done is just soaked it in the water here. And the water that these seaweeds have been soaked in are very flavorful. You're going to taste it tastes very umami packed. It's got quite a bit of salt. Now, depending how you want to use that, I'm going to talk about it a little later as well. But this water here is very precious. So don't throw it out if you do soak it like this. Now the Alaria seaweed, if you look at it here, it's actually quite thick, and it's got the rib here. So when you would have miso soup, you know, the miso soup with the green onions and the tofu at any kind of Japanese restaurant, it is typically made from a similar type of seaweed from this. It's very delicious, very strong. When you bite into it, it's got quite a nice chew. And because this is fresh and very raw, this is what it looks like, but we don't typically see it like that. So normally factories would process this and then they would dry it so it can be sent all across the world, and then you can reconstitute it in water. We're gonna get back to this after. I really, really love this. It's super savory, very nice to work with. You can see all the different shapes you get from it, and that's the beauty with natural fresh seaweed, and the look it will then give the dish after, but more importantly how it tastes. You can see that. Now moving to the sugar kelp here, it's very delicate, so you can almost pull it apart, and it's quite a bit thinner. Actually, this type of seaweed, sugar kelp, is what sea urchin love. Maybe that's why sea urchin tastes so good. We're actually going to use this one in a puree, and I know that in the past I've seen people dry this and make a chip out of it. It's extremely brittle, but it almost dissolves in your mouth and coats your mouth with a lot of umami and beautiful flavor. So something to note, major differences is that this is very delicate, the sugar kelp, very delicate, tender, and then the Alaria is much more stronger, savory, and thick. And this one, we're going to actually eat both of them very gently prepared, but those are the major differences here. Okay, so another type of seaweed we're going to look at is called Rashidi, and this comes from Japan, and it's been dried and cured in the summer months. Usually the best time for seaweed to be harvested is in July, and you can see, or around July, and you can see it's here, and I get this imported strictly for making stock. Now, there's been lots of R&D done for some of the best ways to extract as much umami as possible, and that is cooking this seaweed in water at 140 Fahrenheit for about 1 hour. So you can see that the seaweed, this is the same seaweed actually. So this one I put into the water, gently brought it up to 140, and then once it hit 140, let it simmer, changing the temperature very carefully for 1 hour, and as the result you have this. Now seaweed, although I drawn out all the flavor from it, this can still be used if you cut it thin and then saute it, and it's amazing texture. And this is something especially my wife at home loves. She'll always cut it, saute it, whether it's with rice or different vegetables, and once soy sauce hits this, it soaks it up and makes a delicious flavor. So whenever you're working with seaweed, even when you cut out the rib, be sure not to throw it away, because it keeps being used as delicious additions to some of your dishes. Okay, so just get creative with it. Try not to throw it out, because the texture is wonderful as well. Now, after this seaweed has been cooked, it looks like this. So this is just the water and the seaweed. You can see, almost looks kind of like gelatinous. Now, I brought this up to 185. This is packed with umami right now. When you put this in your mouth and you taste it, it really coats your mouth. And that means there's a lot of things happening, a lot of proteins and deliciousness. So, this is about 185 now. I'm going to add one more thing to this Kombu Dashi. So we've now created a Kombu Dashi, and this is katsubushi, so dried bonito flakes, which are sliced very thin. And the reason they're sliced very thin is to be able to extract as much umami as possible. You hear me saying umami a lot because that's really what the seaweed and the base of Japanese cuisine is our goal, is to draw out the natural umami, whether it's in seaweed, katsubushi, vegetable, meat, fish. That's the overall principle. That's our goal here. So I'm going to drop this in here. Okay. Remove it from the heat. So now we're going to be focusing on the sugar kelp here. And basically what I did was I picked out all different shapes. Because I wanted to get all the different textures really in it. So that's typical kind of what you would see in an aquarium, I guess. But so all different shapes. And remember what I said before, that this is quite delicate and very thin. So you could even just rip it with your fingers. But it's nicer to use a knife because then you can really get the nice edges. So I'm just picking up different ones here. Oh, there you go. That's a very nice one. You can really see it. You can almost see through it. It's almost transparent. All right. So what I did with this is that I removed the really thick ribs. Because you got to think when you're looking at it, it's something that you might not be able to eat. But what I did was I kept all the ribs in. I used all the different styles of the sugar kelp, and then I braised it with the chicken stock and this water here. This has been soaking in here for the day, and this water is really flavorful. So like I said, you don't get rid of any parts of it because it's going to be really delicious. It's going to help the flavor develop as we braise it. Now after I braised it for about 2 hours, the quantities are different, so you're going to get more than this. Have this beautifully gelatinous sweet puree. After it braised, it cooled, and then blended it and put it through a fine strainer, something that you would strain tea through, so the particles aren't on your tongue. You still get that beautiful mouthfeel from the packed full umami braised sugar kelp. Now, I did it in chicken stock because I got these beautiful locally organic chickens, and I hand ground the thigh and the breast, which you have here. Japanese mountain potato, nagahimo, which is also packed with umami. It's quite also gelatinous, like the seaweed. White onion, and then our sugar kelp puree. So you're gonna add everything inside. Have you ever been to a yakitori restaurant or had a tsukune? That's basically what we're making. Japanese tsukune. The white onion adds a little bit of texture. It's also a little bit sweet. And then when I was testing out this dish, it was the first time I ever put this much seaweed in it, but it's very delicious. Adds a sweetness, earthiness, a little bit of a delicate flavor. I think the sugar kelp, after using it quite a bit, is a lot more delicate, and you don't smell it as much as the Alaria. All right, so I formed the chicken skudette with the sugar kelp in it. So chicken ball here, or chicken ball. We're going to steam it for about 8 minutes. Okay, so that's going to be part of the spring soup. Now, the cured and dried seaweed that we had earlier, that was over here, that comes from Japan, and then I added the katsubushi flakes to it. Right when the katsubushi flakes, the tuna flakes, settle down into it, I strained it through a fine strainer, and you can see a perfectly clear dashi here. Okay? So, umami packed broth, which is then going to be the base of our soup. So this here is soy sauce and mirin. Adding. So you get a very light sweetness from the Kombu Dashi. Very, very gentle. And then from the Katsuobushi Dashi, you get a little bit of smoke, and then ton of umami packed in there. And this is a light, although it looks quite dark, it's considered a light soy sauce here. And then, so that adds the salty component. And then you have a little bit of mirin here, which again adds a sweetness and rounds off the soup entirely. Okay, so I'm going to include all the different ratios and how to make a good soup base with the seaweed Kombu Dashi and the Katsuobushi Dashi. Okay, so moving over here, we have the Alaria Seaweed. Now, like I said earlier, this one is very, very savory. Okay, it is the typical one that you would have with miso soup. So it's wonderful to chew on. It's got a lot of texture, and again, packed with umami. So much umami happening. Okay, so I really like this piece. It'll be easy to take off the rib. So I'll put this aside, and then I'm going to show you how I cut it. And then some other seasonal vegetables we have here. Wild leeks, ramps. They just started this week. And then you have sea asparagus, which both need to get blanched. And then you have the Alaria Seaweed. So I'll show you how to cut the Alaria Seaweed here. Okay. See, I took out the rib. All very tender. This is the rib here. Even though we've used the sugar kelp as a puree inside the chicken, because it's very delicate, and if you get the bigger leaves like this, we're actually going to use it the same way that we use the Alaria, and then that really gives it a couple different textures from the fresh seaweed in the soup. So I do the same here. Cut the rib out. Okay. Now, so right now we got the sugar kelp, Alaria. If you look at them side by side, after it's been cut out, color is quite a bit different. I mean, it's a shade different, but you know, if you're looking at it all day, you can really see the difference. And quite a bit thicker. See, it's got this smooth, it's a little bit transparent, but compared to this, it's like a thin piece of, this is like a thin piece of paper, and this is like artist sketching paper. So a little bit thicker, and but both very delicious. So what I have here, if you look at the pot, is it's water, mixed with the soaking water from both different types of seaweed. My goal, and especially having a small restaurant, you always want to use everything within reason. I mean, you're not trying to use things that don't taste good, but using the soaking water of the seaweeds to blanch the vegetables brings all the flavors together and it's going to add to the soup. So, lastly, we're going to cut this seaweed into bite-sized pieces. Getting ready for the blanch. Now we just want to taste our broth here. Because what we're going to do now is blanch our different seaweeds, and then we're going to drop it right in the broth. Wow. Very good. Actually, just a splash of soy. Even the recipes I give you, you're going to have to taste everything. You're going to have to feel it. When this seaweed was harvested and the seaweed that you get is harvested, it's going to be a little bit different. But that's the beauty of natural products. The more different it is each season, the more you have to really be accustomed to knowing how to treat it, what to do differently. But that's the beauty of natural ingredients. And it is way more delicious when it's natural and fresh. That's a fact. All right. So, okay, please come closer here. So first off, we're going to blanch the Alaria Seaweed. You can see right when it goes in, the color changes to a beautiful green. Now that looks like the wakame that we're used to. So this seaweed has been soaking and now it's been blanched. And I'm just going to lift it up right into our soup base. Right into the soup base. Okay, so you got that beautiful color in there. And now we're going to go with the thinner, the sugar kelp. And when I say blanch, I mean we're looking to just cook it a little bit. We're not looking to blanch it and put it in ice water. And you can see it starts to brighten up. This adds a really beautiful texture. We're going to add it there. Now keep in mind my heat on my soup base is off. Dashi is very delicate, so you don't want to heat it several times. This dashi has only been heated once, very gently to make the flavor, and then I'm going to be heating it again when I serve the soup. That's it. Okay. So, a few other ingredients that aren't seaweed are going to make an appearance. First is the wild leeks. When they're first, this is I think the first, no it is for sure, the first pick. So they're not crazy strong, but as we, in another week they do get stronger, I believe. Quite strong. So we're going to cook the roots first. Get it nice and soft. All day, and you really just go by how it feels. You want it nice and tender. I'm only going to use 2 because it's really quite a strong flavor. Feels great. And then go. What I did was I just took off the bottom of them, gave them a nice little wash. And then again, that's going to go into the soup. So now we've got everybody hanging out in here. Lastly, we're going to be cooking the sea asparagus. Come closer, you can see the color also change. It really brightens up. We're gonna give this one a little bit longer. There you go. So I like, again, go by the touch. They're already quite delicate. You can eat them raw. But giving it a nice blanch, I find it opens it up to suck in some of the flavor from the dashi that we're putting in here. Okay. So again, we're going here. There, dry. We're going to go right into here. So our chicken skune has steamed for about 8 minutes. Here it is. And remember that has the sugar kelp blended into it. And so we're going to add this. I've been gently bringing up my dashi soup with the vegetables. So we're going to add the chicken. It's quite hot, the chicken ball. I just took it out of the steamer. Okay, it's just cooled a little bit so it tightens up a bit. Now, I'm just going to gently pour the dashi over the chicken ball to give it a little bath. Okay, now I'm going to raise up the heat. And I'm going to bring it over, and this will be time to plate our soup. So we'll start with the chicken ball in the center. Beautiful wild leeks. Wrap around. And then we got a mix of our seaweeds here. You can smell how, now that the chicken has gone into the broth and the two types of seaweed have entered the dashi, the flavor is just, and the smell and the aroma, it's really changed quite a bit. Okay, and lastly, the sea asparagus will wrap around. I'm hiding the wild leeks a little bit because as it sits in the broth a little longer, it's going to flavor it quite a bit and cook it. There we go. Now we gently pour the broth. Over. This is our Kombu Dashi. The vegetables have been blanched in our Canadian fresh seaweed water. We got the sugar kelp inside the chicken ball. And then we have the 2 types of fresh seaweed. Lastly, I'm finishing with a chrysanthemum flower. Now this is another aroma that's coming in. You can really smell it as I take the different petals off. This is another beautiful spring herb. It's called kinome leaf. And this is a real signifies that spring has sprung in Japan. To open up the oils a bit, smash it. Here we go. This is the final dish using Canadian seaweed.